A comment that I get quite a bit down in the comment section is that observers make no sense. I don't understand observers, I can't make them work inside my redstone circuitry. So today I'm going to try my best to explain how on earth these things function. So let's start things off with the very basics. Observers are specifically designed to detect block updates, and on the face of it, that's all that they do. If we break this block right here, you can see that we got a redstone output through the observer, and that went over to that piston. Now that redstone output is only one redstone tick long, and it also has one redstone tick of delay. So when this observer detects a block update, one redstone tick later, the redstone output is going to come through. And the signal strength of that redstone output is 15 blocks, which means that we can have lovely long redstone lines running out to the redstone components. But let's be honest, if that's all it could detect, players breaking and placing blocks, then it would be pretty useless. Thankfully, it can detect a whole bunch of other stuff. For example, powered rails being turned on or off. It can detect players walking on top of redstone ore because the redstone ore does that sparkly thing, and apparently that is a block update. It will detect grass spreading onto dirt, the different growth stages of crops, and even strange things like water stages. As you can see here, when we remove this water, if you watch the water here, it will gradually go down to 0, and the observer will detect all of these changes and give a whole bunch of redstone outputs. Now these are all well and good, and there are a handful of other things that the observer will detect, but most of them aren't particularly useful. I mean, how many times am I going to have to detect the cycle of water going from a flowing block down to 0? It's not particularly common. However, you see observers popping up in all of my redstone builds. So what on earth am I actually using them for? You see, there are a number of different things that make the observer special when it comes to redstone. The first one is that it gives a redstone output when it's moved. So as you can see, when this is pushed across, it will power our redstone lamp, but because the redstone output only comes in one direction, it's not going to affect any nearby redstone. Same thing can't be said for redstone blocks. It can also be pushed upwards and power upwards without breaking the piston that is pushing it, which once again, unfortunately, the same thing can't be said for redstone blocks, because when this redstone block is pushed upwards, even if we unpower the lever, that piston is going to remain extended because that redstone block is actually bud powering this piston, which means that this thing's never coming down. And finally, you can choose what direction you want the redstone output to come from, and it can power through blocks, which, I mean, you guys know the tune by now, can't be said for redstone blocks. Not only can we not choose the direction of the redstone output, but also it's not going to power this block, which means that it's not going to be powering this redstone lamp. Awful. But it doesn't stop there. It will also detect updates from pieces of redstone circuitry. For example, when we flick a lever, that will give a redstone output. When you press a button, it will give one on the rising edge and one on the falling edge. It will detect updates from redstone dust, repeaters, comparators, pistons, and even TNT. Oh, why did I have to test that one? Well, there goes my demonstrating area. Moving on, it will also detect some very interesting things. For example, when a dropper gets powered, a hopper gets locked, and it can also detect updates from other observers. So essentially you can chain them together, because when this detects an update, it will give a redstone output, and this detects that as an update for the observer, and then it will do the same thing, this will do the same thing, this will do the same thing, and long story short, you get a redstone signal traveling down through it. Now these three things used in conjunction are incredibly useful. I'll get onto that a little bit later on. Oh, and one other thing that it will do is it will detect changes in redstone signal strength. So as we go down the line, this entire redstone line is in fact powered, but as we flick these levers, the signal strength at the end is gradually getting stronger because the source is gradually getting closer and the observer is detecting that. I'll be honest, I don't know how useful this is. I can't say that I've personally used it, but it could be handy in some very specific circumstances. Okay, now that you've seen all the fandangled things the observers can do, I think it's about time that we actually chucked it into some redstone circuits so that we can see this thing working. And I thought I would get things started with something that everyone can understand, a double piston extender. When we hit this button, you can see that we get the full sequence happening. And you may be sat there thinking, how on earth does all of this function inside this tiny area? Have you ever seen old, flush with the floor, double piston extenders? They used to be absolutely enormous, but thanks to the observer, we can now make it considerably smaller, and that's because the observer will detect the repeater being powered, and then one tick after it powers this sticky piston at the bottom here, it will then send a 1 tick redstone pulse through into this block, and by that time, this sticky piston here will be now in the place of this block, so it will spit out its block. But then on the retraction, once this repeater turns off, this bottom sticky piston will retract, and then 1 tick after that happens, this observer will send a redstone output through to this block, which will bud power this piston, causing it to extend, grabbing the block, and then retract, pulling it back down, as you can see right here. After that explanation, I do kind of regret using the term something that everyone will understand. I'm sure there's some of you who are extremely confused by what I just said. Anyway, we're going to move swiftly on from that one because now we're going to be taking a look at chaining observers together. If we hit this button here, you can see we get this really awesome light pattern that moves across all of our redstone lamps. Kind of like a disco lighting system. It would look even better with a redstone clock linked up to it. But if we take a look around the back, you can see that we actually don't have any redstone back here apart from observers. Now there's a number of different reasons why you'd want to do this. Number one is because it looks really awesome and futuristic. I think we can all agree on that one. But more importantly, number two is because it doesn't cause any lighting updates. This system back here isn't causing any lighting updates, whereas if you had big redstone lines with repeaters and everything like that, that would be causing lighting updates, which in turn would cause lag. So if you're building big redstone contraptions that are going to be horrendously laggy and you're building it on a server with other people, it might be worth considering something like this so that you stay friends with them. Otherwise they might get a little bit upset. But even more importantly than that, we have got 3 separate redstone lines, all with different timings, all working directly on top of one another. You can see from the redstone lamps, look, these are all timed differently, and you wouldn't be able to do that with conventional redstone because, of course, redstone and repeaters need to be placed on blocks, which is a bit of a limiting factor. That was extremely fast, and I hope that you got all of the details. Right, let's move on to the next one, which, funnily enough, is actually fairly similar to the previous one. Now we're going to be taking a look at chaining observers together along with other blocks and also other redstone components. So do you remember earlier on I mentioned that observers can detect when hoppers or droppers get powered by redstone. Now this is going to come in incredibly handy with this redstone contraption because it will allow us to send redstone signals vertically and also horizontally round corners and everything like that. This thing's incredibly versatile. If we just hit this button here, you can see that we get a redstone output through that redstone lamp despite the fact that we don't have any redstone in this thing. And the way that it's working is this observer down at the bottom here is detecting the update of this button. It is then powering this block, which will then power this hopper, which that observer will then detect, which will then power the block, power the hopper, which this observer will detect, and so on and so forth. You could do this right the way from bedrock all the way up to the sky limit, and it's relatively fast. It's faster than a redstone torch tower, and more importantly, it's less laggy than a redstone torch tower. Once again, you're not getting those lighting updates, which means that the other people on your server are still going to like you. And as I mentioned earlier on, yes, this thing is incredibly versatile. It will work round corners, it will go vertically, downwards, upwards, horizontally, sideways, left ways, right ways, upside down, the whole lot. So you can really fit this in pretty much anywhere, and you can just jam it inside redstone contraptions. I use it quite a lot. Now I could be wrong here, but I thought it would be a good idea for your understanding to see a big redstone contraption that I've recently worked on using observers. I really hope this doesn't just confuse you more, but this is the fanciest useless machine in Minecraft. It was my previous redstone video, and I have to say I'm very proud of it. When you place in the lever and give it a flick, the machine will then break the lever and turn itself off. That's the whole point of a useless machine. But in this, you can see that we've used a whole ton of observers. Now, the observer that I'm interested in talking about is this observer right here, because this is the observer that's in charge of powering this sticky piston, which is flying up in the sky. Now, before observers, this would be impossible. You wouldn't be able to power this sticky piston, but thankfully now that we have observers, you can. If we place in this lever, you can see that the piston gets pushed up by the triple piston extender, then the observer gets pushed across, which then powers that piston, causing it to break the lever, and then everything retracts out the way. Now, I am so sorry that everything happened so fast. I built this thing to be incredibly quick, but hopefully you just about captured that. All the other observers that you see around here are used in various different ways. So this is used as a monostable circuit. There should be another observer down here, which is also being used as a monostable circuit. So it gets pushed across, firing a 1-tick pulse into the redstone. Then when it gets retracted, obviously it will do the same, but it won't be powering the redstone. So it's just a rising edge monostable circuit. Then over here, we have got observers that are being used once again as monostable circuits, but this time they're powering blocks in this area, which means that we can power pistons that are next to those blocks without having to involve redstone torches. And then I think that should just about do it with observers. I think that's all of them inside this build. So there's not too many, there's not a ridiculous quantity, but all of them are incredibly useful. So I think that just about wraps everything up. Hopefully that has made observers make a little bit more sense, even though part of me is a little bit concerned that I've actually made it worse for some of you. So I'll put links to the videos down in the description that explain various things in more detail, and also other Redstone videos that feature observer heavy things. But all in all I can say to those of you who still don't understand is that just go out and experiment. See what they do in various different Redstone contraptions, try building with them, and then eventually you'll learn how they function. But unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, that is all I've got time for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please also hit that like button, and if you really loved it, then make sure to subscribe. But thanks for watching, guys. This has been Mumbo, and I'm out. I'll see you later. Oh, and be sure to check out the filming channel. You know what to do.